Hi, this is Dave Campfield of the COMMACK Public Library, and I am sitting here with a Mr. Sherman Carll, who actually owned the land that the library stands on years before the library was there.
My family owned the land that the family stands on. I didn't personally.
Before moving to COMMACK in 1929... COMMACK in 1929. He's a purist. That is the way it's supposed to be pronounced. In 1929, he lived in East Northport. You were born in Huntington Hospital?
Correct. 4 years after it was established.
Wow. And the home that you lived in East Northport is still a home today?
Yes.
Like, whereabouts was that?
Well, it's on Pulaski Road. It's a little bit west of the incinerator and dump. The farm has, of course, been developed, has houses all over it. But the old house that was our home for a time is still in existence. I believe it belongs to a community of nuns.
Wow.
When we lived in it, it had no pressurized water, no electricity. Of course, it's been modernized in those respects.
So you were up to 4 years old when you lived there. Do you have any memories of living there?
Yes. The main difference is it didn't have electricity. Lights were dim, kerosene lamps. My grandmother had to trim them and process them each day for use when it got dark.
And were you the only house on the block at that
point? No, there were a few. There were other farms. In fact, the nearby farm belonged to the Ketchum family. There was a girl there who was about the same age as my mother. They walked together from Studorf Road to Lockfield, where there was an elementary school. This
might be a question that's outside your area. The COMMACK Arena. I have memories in early childhood of a flea market that was once a great stadium.
That was one of the last things before it collapsed completely.
Right, and then it became King Cullen, it became Whole Foods. Now, that establishment, I guess there was a drive-in movie theater in that area. It came around in the 50s. COMMACK Arena. Did you, as a COMMACK resident, I think you were living here at that point in the 50s and 60s, had you ever frequented?
Well, we attended, the circus came there once a year. The high-quality professional circus was something new in our community. I know as a child I enjoyed it, as the nearby neighbors succeeded in getting the manure from the elephants, which they used in their gardens.
Unintended benefit. Do you happen to remember John Kennedy was here?
Oh yes, I at that time I was employed at Zahn's Airfield in Amityville, and when Newsday needed an aerial photograph, they contacted the company the operator I worked for. So with the J3 Cub, which had on the right side what they call a clamshell door, you could remove one panel. Newsday would send their photographer. Our pilot would fly him from the back seat. And Kennedy was to appeared at the arena at a raffle. He and Jackie arrived at MacArthur Airport. The transportation from MacArthur Airport to the Long Island Arena was an open car. They used those for political rallies. So Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy were in the back seat, and our pilot knew when they'd be along, and on an open stretch of property to the east on the GI Highway, our pilot, Bob Havoc, said, "How close do you want to get?" So he buzzed the rally and got a picture of the Kennedys in the open car. Bob asked, "How close do you want to get?" So he really gave him a buzz job, and the photographer was able to get a very clear picture of the Kennedys.
Before he was elected. This was
before he was elected. And Newsday, when they had photographs in very fine print below the picture, they would put Newsday photograph by what is the name of the photographer, Bob Havoc, a pilot. So while I wasn't present, I saw the picture, and of course I wasn't present on the flight. Bob did a great job of giving him a close buzz.
Right. And so you weren't here for when he spoke either. You were probably working. You know, when Kennedy was in COMMACK, you weren't actually in COMMACK.
Oh no, I wasn't. I was living in COMMACK, but I wasn't working in COMMACK. The Carll Farm situation had deteriorated, and I went looking for a job 6 months before this incident.
Right. And also, Richard Nixon was president 1960, around the same time, at COMMACK Arena.
That's also true, but he didn't arrive in such a spectacular manner.
Right. Did you hear any stories about Nixon being at the COMMACK Arena?
I stood in the crowd and watched him go by. Now, I got a story with the COMMACK Arena. I can't remember the name of the promoters. They formed a corporation. They put money in. And once this seemed to catch on a little, they got out in a way. The high-pressure salespeople got a second round of investors, and they got out. They sold their stock. The second didn't know that the original promoters were. So the promoters walked away, and the second row of investors didn't do well. And I remember a salesperson coming to try to sell my mother on investing in the arena, and she didn't. So.
Well, what I remember then, it was the roller skating rink that sort of on its way out. You know, I remember that. And then there was a big fire there, wasn't there?
I don't remember. That's a detail you know more about than I do.
Before what stands there today, the COMMACK Arena, which is then a flea market and a roller skating rink, had a fire in it. There was a lot of suspicion around the fire, as in was this done intentionally?
That's a possibility.
We have a question. Does Mr. Carll have any memories of Chief Hulse of the COMMACK Fire Department and the many residents of COMMACK who became volunteer firefighters?
I have a feeling that he is later. I understood that I was part of the culture in rural COMMACK. When you became 18, you joined the fire department. And I did at the age of 18. And later, I was no longer working in the district. I was working away in Amityville. And I knew there was a waiting list of people who wanted to join, and I figured I wasn't very productive as a fireman, so I resigned to let someone else in. So they told me when I resigned, well, you've been in 20 years, you can keep your uniform. And I said, well, why would I want the uniform? Well, to be buried in, of course.
What? You know what, Sherman? Everybody who said that to you is dead. Across from the COMMACK Arena is Commander Frank Amore Jr. Cannon Park. There's some kind of turret gun there. Do you have any recollection? I've been driving past this for some years now.
I have no real information concerning this gentleman or the Memorial Park. I understand that the exhibit is an anti-aircraft gun, which was apparently used on a merchant ship.
Yes. One thing that my friends and I had noticed growing up is that there are some very small cemeteries. There's when there was a Modell's, there was a little cemetery there. Do you happen to know anything about the story of the people who are buried there?
No, I don't know. I know that each farm had a cemetery, and I believe about 1850 it was decided that we should have a central cemetery. So the COMMACK Cemetery Incorporated is just north of it, adjacent to the Methodist Church. Part of there are burials on the Methodist Church property, and there's the non-sectarian COMMACK Cemetery Incorporated. And when that happened, families stopped doing burials in their family cemeteries, and in some cases they exhumed what they could do, took down stones, moved them, and moved what there was in the way of remains to the present cemetery property.
This is a specific question that I've been asked a couple of times from a librarian who's very curious. Do you recall the sequence of events that led to the library being built on your property? What were your feelings about the acquisition at that time?
Okay, that property belonged to the brother of my grandfather, a Silas Strong. I thought the library is an asset to the community, and it has been a good neighbor. So I was rather pleased that it was a library rather than a gas station.
Now, we have some comments from a S. Grogan on YouTube. Who commented?
That's Mrs. Grogan.
Oh, okay. Mrs. Grogan says, I see Mr. Carll as a great historian providing an extraordinary amount of interesting information about early COMMACK, his teachers, his military service, amongst other topics. I was wondering whether Mildred Beck, one of his elementary school teachers, was related to Edna Beck,
yes,
a longtime USPS, United States Postal Service employee of COMMACK, who I believe lived to 100.
They were sisters. Well, what shall I say? I knew of Edna Beck. I suppose all these people are dead. They won't be annoyed. Edna Beck and Charlie Hornet had a romance going, and old man Beck was apparently a difficult person, and he broke it up. So Charlie eventually married someone else and ran the sawmill, but Edna Beck never married. Mildred Beck taught the 5th and 6th grades. She taught me 5th and 6th grades. At that time, a high school graduate could go to something they called normal school for a year and a half, and then they could teach. All of the small number of teachers in the COMMACK Grammar School were excellent, but Mildred Beck was, of course, one of them, and very good, and I'll always be in debt to her for the great job she did in teaching 5th and 6th grades. Now, people would say, well, you had a very small staff, you must have had an inferior school. That wasn't true. They did a great job.
To backtrack just a little bit, Mrs. Grogan also asked, did
Mary Grogan.
Mary, but no, this is S. Grogan. This must be another family member.
It's got to be the same lady. Maybe I have something wrong, or maybe she has more than a middle name or something of that nature. The lady I knew worked as a teller at the Sag Harbor Savings Bank, which is now the Apple Bank on COMMACK Road, and she was a very nice person. I hope she's alive and doing well.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
So was the Lily Tulip Cup Corporation on COMMACK Road originally Moreland Farm property?
Yes. Yes. Moreland Farm was adjacent to across the road from us.
I have a question on behalf of myself. What is the Lily Tulip Cup Corporation? I'm not familiar with that. Does that still stand? What is it?
It's now, I believe, a medical group.
I see, yeah. Did Green Farms Elementary School ever conduct tours of the Carll Farm?
I know there were tours of the Carll Farm. It's safe to say as a generality that that's true. Now, I want to tell you about the tours of the Carll Farm. If you got 30 cows, you'll have a new calf about every 2 weeks. So my aunt would contact the school, say 3 days after a new calf arrives. They'd bust some first and second graders to come and pet the new calf. Those kids would have little reason to be interested in the farm. They were interested in the petting zoo. So what do you do the next day? The teacher says we should write a letter of thanks to Miss Carll. So over the years, she's accumulated a stack of thank you letters that high.
Were watermelon or other fruits raised on the Carll Farm?
Yes. In the transition period, the cows were gone and so forth. My mother at that time owned some of the property, and farm friends, the Benekes, grew watermelons. They had 1 year a disaster. The seed that they had purchased wasn't what they had intended, and the watermelons grew well and they were delicious, but they were yellow in color, and people wouldn't buy them. They were offering a free slice of watermelon. No, we
because
won't.
People thought they were bad, even though it was just a different
Right.
form of watermelon.
Right.
Yeah. Before Sunken Meadow State Park was opened, What beach did COMMACK residents mainly attend?
Well, the town beach was Crab Meadow Beach. Huntington Town Beach is Crab Meadow Beach. That was the place that usually they went. To the east of Crab Meadow Beach was a stretch of undeveloped open beach belonging to some, I don't remember the name of the lady who owned it, but she left it open to the public. And that was less crowded, and there was no employees or so.
Yeah.
Often the COMMACK people used that one rather than Crab Meadow.
Now, here's a real interesting one, because I've only heard vague bits of information about it. Do you have any memories of the COMMACK Hotel, originally located at the corner of COMMACK Road and Jericho Turnpike?
Yes. Well, it was a very small operation until the first Roosevelt administration. They put an end to Prohibition. So bars popped up in sight, and the COMMACK Hotel gained clientele. The bar downstairs started to carry it.
Yeah. Was it a big, I guess, for lack of a better word, tourist attraction? Was that one of the biggest things in COMMACK at that time?
It was one of the biggest buildings.
Right.
There was no reason for us to stay there.
Because you lived here. Yeah. Now,
but there was, at the intersection of Jericho Turnpike, Town Line Road to the north, and now COMMACK Road to the south. At that time it was called Crooked Hill Road. When this house was built, it was said to be on Crooked Hill Road. They moved the name down at near the Motor Parkway. It divides. One road goes to Babylon, one road goes to Bay Shore. Crooked Hill Road goes to Bay Shore, Brentwood and Bay Shore.
So didn't that burn down in the COMMACK Hotel? I hear something. It hit some fate that was unexpected.
I don't remember how it was terminated.
Yeah. Okay. So do you know what stands there now? Is that where White Castle is, or?
Oh, White Castle is over on the northeast side. That was the COMMACK garage, gas station, and I more recently learned speakeasy.
Really? So the garage came after the speakeasy?
The garage and the speakeasy were simultaneous, and the garage survived the legalization of alcohol.
So you're saying that while the front was a garage, the speakeasy was on the inside?
Well, no, the routine was farming is lonely.
Yeah.
And you find excuses to go meet people.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing in the social daily was the arrival of the early evening mail. People who've been by themselves or with their livestock during the day find a way to go to the general store to await the arrival of the evening mail.
So mail was more than once a day then?
The mail arrived twice a day, but the social thing was the second one.
Right.
One came early in the day. I don't know the exact hour.
Now, they were meeting, where was this at? People were
Okay,
meeting
the
mail?
general store was on the northwest corner of the intersection. Charles Worley General Merchandise, and the post office was in the rear of the store. Supplied by the post office was a metal set of boxes and a window and a station for the postmistress, who was either Mamie Otten or Edna Beck. People come in the store and mill around and talk about the ball game and so forth.
Right.
Fred Goldsmith comes in with a couple of bags of mail. He goes behind the counter, delivering them to the postmistress, who slams down the metal slide in front of the window and sorts the mail. When she's finished with the mail, finished with the sorting, she moves the slide up with another clank. People go to look and get anything out of the boxes they have, or, as I say, a lot of the mails went across the street to the garage to imbibe.
So, this general store was where COMMACK Corners?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so this speakeasy, which it doesn't sound like, because actually you were only a little kid. So at this speakeasy, I'm trying to imagine there's the garage, and the garage is where they do auto repairs, and
Right,
automobiles are new at the time.
And the back section,
back
the
section.
auto repairs is where the alcohol was available. And of course, I didn't know this until much later.
Right. Well, they kept it secret very well. Were there any other big COMMAK hotspots that you remember from your childhood? Any big events that happened in COMMAK?
There were the Burrs had the Burrs had two racetracks, a half-mile and a mile, and the half-mile track was the better developed.
Before your time here, racetracks.
Well, I saw the racetrack, but it was in decline. There were barns there. They were still raising horses. The peak of the horse society was declining.
Yeah.
The Model T Ford was replacing the horse.
Right. Do you remember? I'm assuming that the racetrack with the horses must have been a big hot spot where people congregate, sort of like a ball game, where there was people in stands.
I don't know too much about that, but I know that baseball has always been a fundamental in rural areas, and of course, COMMAK had a team.
You remembered that one of the teams was named the Invaders.
Oh, that's in Northport and East Northport.
But do you happen to remember what the COMMAK team was called?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But the Invaders called on a larger population. They were far more advanced. The COMMAK were able to play St. James and Melville and COMMAK. They were about the three lowest skilled teams. And it wasn't fair to match the more advanced league, and the less advanced league couldn't really compete. You had to separate the skill levels.
Yeah.
The Invaders were good.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the Invaders, they were made up of probably firemen and policemen and other kinds of different professions. They weren't full-time players. They just
all of these people weren't full-time players.
Yeah.
They played on Sunday afternoons. They bought their own uniforms. They bought their own shoes. And they passed the seventh inning. Somebody came around with a hat, and you would have put in some information, some small amount of money to keep this thing going.
And do you remember where it was they played?
The Invaders played near, it's now Pulaski Road and Lockfield, on the northeast corner. I think there's still a ball field there.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And the COMMAK team?
The COMMAK team played on somebody's property. Farmers would let them put aside some property and let the ball players play there. The corner of COMMAK Road and the northeast corner across the street east of the COMMAK Hotel wasn't farmed intensively, and whoever owned it let the ball players play on it.
I want to thank you so much for your time. On behalf of S. Grogan, many thanks to Mr. Carll and the COMMAK Public Library for doing this wonderful interview and posting it. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be very happy to hear this follow-up, and hopefully let's continue doing this. So great seeing you, and we'll catch up very soon.
I very much enjoyed your friendship, and I hope we can find some reason to further it.